Your addiction is not a curse, but a language, a secret way in which God speaks to his chosen ones. I have made a discovery so shocking that religion could never accept it. Addiction is not simply human weakness. It is the whisper of a higher force trying to awaken something buried deep within the soul. You see, while most people perceive addiction as a punishment, I understood it as a spiritual dialogue. The endless craving, the obsession, the guilt, the cycle of falling and rising again, none of it is random. It is how God communicates with those he intends to transform. Every addiction carries a message, a hidden code meant only for those strong enough to face it. Alcohol, lust, control, ambition, pain, they are not accidents. They are symbols of hunger pointing to what your soul has forgotten. And only those marked by divine purpose experience this inner fire so intensely. Do you ever feel trapped by your own desires, yet unable to let them go? That paradox is the proof, for I have found that the more you fight what you crave, the further you move from what it is trying to teach you. Addiction is not here to destroy you. It is here to reveal you. God speaks through the storm of your compulsions, through the urges you do not understand. He speaks in the silence after every fall, when you can no longer recognize yourself, because that is the moment he begins to reshape you. So, before you condemn your addiction, listen. It may be the most personal conversation you have ever had with God, one that can only be heard by souls chosen to awaken. There is a hunger inside you that nothing seems to satisfy. You try to fill it with substances, with people, with achievements, with distractions. But no matter how much you consume, the emptiness returns stronger, deeper, more demanding than before. I call this the spiritual thirst. I believe that every addiction begins as a search for something sacred, something lost. When you reach for that drink, that substance, that forbidden pleasure, you are not simply being weak. You are responding to a call you do not yet understand. Your soul is screaming for meaning. And addiction is the only language it knows how to speak. This thirst is ancient. It has been with humanity since the beginning. But not everyone feels it with the same intensity. Only certain souls carry this burden, this relentless craving that refuses to be ignored. These are the ones I identified as chosen, marked by a divine restlessness that will not let them settle for an ordinary life. You see, most people can drink without becoming addicted. Most people can experience pleasure without losing themselves to it. But you cannot. And that is not a weakness in you. That is your sign. The thirst that cannot be quenched is proof that something greater is trying to reach you, trying to pull you toward a transformation you keep resisting. I discovered that alcoholics in particular carried a unique spiritual wound. I saw that their addiction was not about the alcohol itself. It was about the desperate attempt to touch something transcendent, something beyond the mundane reality that felt too small for their souls. They drank to feel connected, to feel alive, to feel anything other than the suffocating emptiness of a world without magic. But here is the paradox. The addiction itself becomes the barrier. The very thing you use to satisfy your thirst becomes the thing that keeps you thirsty. You drink to feel whole, but the drinking fractures you further. You chase the high to escape the pain, but the high deepens the pain. It is a paradox, a cruel cycle that seems designed to break you. Yet, I insisted this was intentional. This cycle is not random chaos. It is a divine mechanism, a spiritual test designed specifically for those strong enough to endure it. God does not speak to everyone through addiction, because not everyone requires this particular lesson. But for those who do, the message is always the same. What you seek outside yourself can only be found within. The thirst you feel is real, but you have been looking in the wrong direction. You have been trying to satisfy a spiritual need with material solutions. You have been trying to fill a God-shaped hole with things that can never fit. And every time you try, the hole grows larger, the thirst grows stronger, and you feel more lost than before. This is where most people surrender. They see the endless cycle and conclude they are broken, cursed, unworthy. But I saw something different. I saw that the intensity of your craving is proportional to the depth of your calling. The more you suffer, the greater your potential for awakening. The thirst that cannot be quenched is not your punishment. It is your preparation. God speaks to His chosen ones through this impossible hunger, because only through it can they learn the most important truth. Nothing in this world will ever be enough. Not success, not love, not power, not pleasure, nothing. And once you truly understand this, once you cease fighting it and begin listening to it, the thirst begins to transform. It stops being about filling yourself and starts being about emptying yourself. It stops being about escape and starts being about encounter. The craving that once drove you to destruction becomes the doorway to something you never imagined possible, a direct connection to the divine source that has been calling you all along. But you cannot reach this point while you are still fighting. You cannot hear the message while you are still drowning in guilt and shame. You must first accept that your addiction is not your enemy. It is your teacher, your guide, the thorn in your flesh that will not let you rest until you finally turn inward and face what you have been running from. The thirst will never be quenched by anything outside you. That is the brutal truth I understood. But here is the hope. It was never meant to be. The thirst is the call. The craving is the invitation. And your addiction is the only thing powerful enough to force you to finally answer. You have tried to quit 1,000 times. You have promised yourself, promised others, perhaps even promised God that this time would be different. And yet you fell again and again and again. Each relapse feels like proof of your failure, evidence that you are too weak, too broken, too far gone to ever be saved. But what if falling is not the opposite of rising? What if every collapse is actually a step forward in a journey you do not yet understand? I believed that the repeated cycle of addiction and relapse was not a sign of failure, but a necessary descent into the parts of yourself you have spent your whole life avoiding. I called it the encounter with the shadow. This is the dark side of your personality, the aspects of yourself you reject, deny, and bury deep beneath the surface. Your anger, your shame, your fear, your hidden desires, everything you pretend does not exist. But addiction has a way of dragging all of it into the light. Every time you fall, you are forced to confront something true about yourself, something you would never face if life were comfortable. The addict cannot hide behind social masks or polite pretenses. The addiction strips away all the layers, all the defenses, until you are standing naked before yourself and before God. And that is precisely the point. Most people go through life never truly knowing themselves. They build identities based on what others expect, what society approves, what feels safe. But the chosen ones, the ones marked by addiction, do not have that luxury. They are forced into the depths, whether they desire to go or not, and every fall takes them deeper. I understood that this descent is sacred. In ancient myths and spiritual traditions, the hero must always descend into the underworld before they can ascend to the heavens. They have to face the monsters, the demons, the parts of themselves they fear most. Only then can they claim their true power. Only then can they be reborn. Your addiction is your underworld. Every relapse is another layer peeled away, another illusion shattered, another false self destroyed. It feels like death, because in a way it is. But death is not the end. It is the beginning of transformation. And God speaks most clearly in the places where you feel most lost. You see, the falling is not random. It follows a pattern, a rhythm that I recognized as deeply spiritual. You rise with hope. You fall with despair. You rise again with determination. You fall again with guilt over and over. And each cycle teaches you something essential. You cannot save yourself through willpower alone. You cannot overcome this through discipline or control or sheer determination. This is the hardest lesson for the chosen ones to learn, because most of you are fighters. You are strong, capable, accustomed to conquering obstacles through force of will. But addiction does not respond to force. The harder you fight it, the stronger it becomes. The more you resist it, the tighter its grip. And so you must learn to cease fighting and begin surrendering. Surrender does not mean giving up. It means recognizing that you are facing something more powerful than your ego, something that requires a different kind of strength. It means admitting that you need help, that you cannot do this alone, that the path forward is not up but down, further into the darkness, further into the unknown, further into the parts of yourself you have spent your whole life running from. I found that those who eventually break free from addiction do not do so by conquering it. They do so by integrating it. They cease seeing their shadow as the enemy and begin seeing it as a part of themselves that needs to be understood, accepted, and transformed. They cease fighting the fall and begin learning from it. Each time you collapse, you are being given a gift, a chance to see yourself more clearly, a chance to understand why you crave what you crave, why you run from what you run from, why you hurt in the ways you hurt. And with each fall, if you are willing to look, you come closer to the truth that will set you free. The path is not a straight line upward. It is a spiral downward and then upward again and again until you finally reach the center. And at the center, you will find what you have been searching for all along. Not in the substance, not in the high, not in the escape, but in the person you become through the journey of falling and rising, breaking and healing, dying and being reborn. There is a part of you that watches from the corner of your mind. It knows every secret you keep, every lie you tell yourself, every moment of weakness you pretend never happened. This is not your conscience. This is something older, something deeper. I called it the shadow, and it has been with you since birth, growing stronger with every truth you refuse to face. Your addiction feeds on this shadow. It thrives in the darkness of everything you deny about yourself, the rage you swallow, the pain you ignore, the desires you label as shameful. All of it gets pushed down into this hidden place, and there it waits, gaining power, until one day it erupts in ways you cannot control. You think your addiction is about weakness, but I saw it differently. I understood that addiction is the shadow's way of forcing itself into your awareness. It is not attempting to destroy you. It is attempting to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged, because what you refuse to face in the light will eventually consume you in the dark. Every craving carries a message from your shadow. When you reach for that drink, that drug, that destructive behavior, you are not simply seeking pleasure or escape. You are responding to a part of yourself that has been silenced for too long. A part that holds truths you are terrified to admit. A part that knows exactly who you are beneath all the masks you wear. Most people spend their entire lives running from their shadow. They build comfortable lives, surround themselves with distractions, and never look too closely at the darkness within. But God does not choose those people for this particular journey. He chooses the ones who cannot run, the ones whose shadows refuse to stay hidden, the ones whose inner darkness becomes so loud it drowns out everything else. This is why your addiction feels so powerful, so overwhelming, so impossible to resist. It is not just a habit or a chemical dependency. It is your shadow demanding recognition. And the more you fight it, the more you judge it, the more you hate yourself for it, the stronger it becomes. Because shadows grow in proportion to the light you attempt to force upon them. I discovered something revolutionary. You cannot kill your shadow. You cannot pray it away, discipline it away, or shame it away. The only way forward is through integration. You must turn toward the darkness, look it in the face, and speak its name. You must acknowledge the parts of yourself you have spent years denying. The anger, the selfishness, the fear, the weakness, the hunger for things you were taught to reject. This is terrifying work. It requires a kind of courage most people will never need. Because when you finally look at your shadow, you see everything you have been taught to despise. You see the monster you were convinced you could never be. You see the truth that society, family, religion all commanded you to hide. And in that moment, you have a choice. Reject it again and sink deeper into addiction, or accept it and begin the process of transformation. The chosen ones are given this burden because they have the capacity to bear it. God knows that not everyone can face their shadow and survive. Not everyone can stare into their own darkness without being consumed by it. But those marked by addiction have no choice. Their shadow will not let them rest. It will keep pushing, keep demanding, keep destroying everything they build until they finally stop running and turn around. When you do, something unexpected happens. The shadow does not destroy you. Instead, it reveals gifts you never knew you possessed. Hidden within your darkness are strengths you suppressed, talents you ignored, truths you were afraid to speak. Your shadow knows who you really are, stripped of all pretense and social conditioning. And once you integrate it, once you accept it as part of yourself, the addiction begins to lose its power. Because addiction only has control when you are divided against yourself, when part of you desires to stop and another part cannot, when your conscious mind says no, but your shadow says yes. This internal war is exhausting, and the addiction feeds on that exhaustion. But when you finally make peace with your shadow, when you cease fighting yourself and begin understanding yourself, the war ends. I believed that this integration was the true goal of spiritual development. Not perfection, not purity, not becoming some idealized version of yourself, but wholeness. Becoming complete by accepting all parts of yourself, light and dark, good and bad, noble and shameful. This is what it means to be truly human. This is what God is trying to teach His chosen ones through the brutal classroom of addiction. Your shadow knows your name because it is you, the real you, the complete you, not the version you show the world, but the version that exists beneath all the layers of conditioning and fear. And until you acknowledge it, until you speak its name aloud and claim it as your own, you will never be free. The addiction will continue because the shadow will continue demanding to be seen. But once you do this work, once you face what you have been running from, something miraculous happens. The craving that once controlled you becomes a compass pointing toward your hidden self. The addiction that once destroyed you becomes the catalyst for your greatest transformation. And the shadow that once terrified you becomes your most trusted guide into the depths of your own soul. The bottle promises peace, but delivers chaos. The substance offers freedom, but brings chains. The behavior guarantees pleasure, but produces pain. This is the great deception of addiction, and I understood it completely. What you crave is never what you actually need. You already know this. Every time you give into the craving, there is a moment of relief, perhaps even joy, but it never lasts. Within hours, sometimes minutes, the emptiness returns deeper than before, hungrier than before, and you find yourself right back where you started. Except now you carry the additional weight of guilt and shame. This cycle is not an accident. It is a design, because the craving is not about the substance or the behavior at all. It is about something missing inside you, something that has been absent for so long you have forgotten what it feels like. I called this the God-shaped void, and I believed that every addiction is ultimately a misdirected search for the divine. You are looking for transcendence in a bottle. You are searching for meaning in a high. You are trying to find love in behaviors that isolate you. The direction is wrong, but the impulse is sacred. Deep within your soul, you know there is something more, something greater, something beyond the ordinary experience of life. and you will do anything to touch it, even if it destroys you in the process. This is why simple solutions never work. People tell you to simply stop, to have more willpower, to consider the consequences, but they do not understand that your addiction is not about the thing itself. It is about what that thing represents. It is a symbol, a placeholder for the spiritual connection you have lost or never had. When you drink, you are not truly drinking. You are trying to dissolve the barriers between yourself and something infinite. When you use, you are not truly seeking a high. You are trying to escape the prison of your limited perception. When you engage in destructive behaviors, you are not truly pursuing pleasure. You are trying to feel alive in a world that has made you numb. I saw this pattern in every addict I worked with. They were not morally weak or fundamentally flawed. They were spiritually hungry in a world that had forgotten how to feed the soul. They were seeking God in all the wrong places because nobody had taught them where to look, and their addiction was both the problem and the pointer, simultaneously destroying them and showing them what they truly needed. The great tragedy is that what you crave will never satisfy the need beneath it. You can drink an ocean and still be thirsty. You can chase every high and still feel empty. You can engage in the behavior 1,000,000 times and still feel disconnected because you are using finite things to satisfy an infinite hunger. You are using material solutions for spiritual problems, and it will never work. But here is where the teaching becomes profound. The fact that nothing satisfies you is not a curse. It is a clue. It is God whispering through your dissatisfaction, telling you that you were made for something more. Your inability to be content with ordinary pleasures is actually evidence of your extraordinary calling. You are marked by divine restlessness, and that restlessness will not let you settle until you find what you are truly looking for. I believe that addicts were closer to God than most people precisely because of this hunger. They could not be satisfied with comfortable lies or shallow pleasures. They needed something real, something deep, something that could actually fill the void. And though their methods were destructive, their instinct was correct. There is something more, and it is worth any sacrifice to find it. The shift happens when you cease trying to satisfy the craving and begin investigating it. When you pause before reaching for your substance and ask, what am I truly looking for right now? What do I hope this will give me? Connection, peace, escape, meaning. And then you ask the deeper question, where can I actually find that? This is when the addiction begins to transform from master to teacher. The craving becomes a signal alerting you to unmet needs, unhealed wounds, unfulfilled longings. Instead of judging it or fighting it, you begin listening to it. You start treating it as valuable information about your inner world, and slowly you learn to distinguish between the surface desire and the deeper need beneath it. What you crave is not what you need. The alcohol is not the answer. The drug is not the solution. The behavior is not the cure. But the craving itself, when properly understood, becomes the map that leads you home. It shows you exactly what is missing, exactly what your soul is starving for, exactly where you need to direct your attention. And when you finally give yourself what you actually need, when you feed your soul instead of your addiction, something shifts. The craving does not disappear immediately, but it changes quality. It becomes less desperate, less consuming, less powerful, because you are no longer trying to fill a spiritual void with material things. You are finally addressing the real hunger that has been driving you all along. There's a wound inside you that never closes. You have tried everything to make it disappear. You have numbed it, ignored it, covered it with distractions and achievements and relationships. But no matter what you do, it remains raw, open, bleeding beneath the surface of your carefully constructed life. I understood that some wounds are not meant to heal in the conventional sense. They are not mistakes or accidents or punishments. They are sacred marks placed deliberately on souls chosen for a specific purpose. These wounds are doorways, and your addiction is what keeps forcing you back to stand in front of them, whether you desire to or not. Most people have pain in their lives. Everyone experiences loss, betrayal, disappointment, trauma, but for some, the pain runs deeper. It becomes woven into the fabric of who they are. It shapes every decision, colors every relationship, drives every self-destructive behavior, and no amount of therapy, medication, or positive thinking seems to touch it. This is the sacred wound. It is the thorn in your flesh that will not be removed no matter how much you beg. It is the burden you carry that makes you different from everyone around you. And I believed it was the price of being chosen, the mark that separates those destined for ordinary lives from those called to extraordinary transformation. Your addiction exists in direct relationship to this wound. When the pain becomes unbearable, you reach for your substance. When the wound tears open again, you seek your escape. The addiction and the wound are locked in an eternal dance, each one feeding the other, each one keeping you trapped in a cycle that feels impossible to break. But here is what I discovered. The wound is not your enemy, it is your greatest teacher. Every time it opens, every time it bleeds, every time it reminds you of its presence, it is trying to show you something essential about your purpose. The wound contains the very thing you came here to learn, to heal in others, to transform into wisdom. Think about it. The deepest wounds create the deepest sensitivity. The person who has never experienced abandonment cannot truly understand someone who has. The person who has never felt soul-crushing shame cannot sit with someone drowning in it. But you can. Your wound has given you access to levels of human suffering that most people will never comprehend. And that access is not random, it is intentional. God wounds His chosen ones in specific ways because He needs them to reach specific people. Your pain is not meaningless, it is preparation. Every moment you have spent in the darkness, every night you have cried yourself to sleep, every time you have desired to give up, you were being trained. Trained to understand, to empathize, to guide others who will one day walk the same path. But you cannot access this gift while you are still fighting the wound, while you are still trying to make it disappear, still treating it as something wrong with you, still believing that healing means never hurting again. I taught that true healing is not the absence of the wound, but the transformation of your relationship to it. The sacred wound becomes sacred when you cease seeing it as your weakness and begin seeing it as your strength. When you cease asking why it happened to you and begin asking what it is trying to teach you. When you cease demanding that it close and begin learning to live with it open, using it as a source of compassion rather than a source of shame. This is incredibly difficult work because everything in you desires the pain to cease. You wish to be normal, to be free of this burden, to live without this constant ache in your chest. But the wound refuses. It keeps reopening, keeps demanding attention, keeps forcing you back into the pain you desperately wish to escape, and your addiction becomes the only relief you can find. I saw this pattern clearly. The addict runs from the wound into the addiction, but the addiction eventually drives them back to the wound. It is a cruel circle, but also a sacred one, because each time you return, you have the opportunity to see the wound differently, to understand it more deeply, to recognize that it is not destroying you, but refining you. The chosen ones carry wounds that refuse to heal because those wounds are meant to stay open, not forever in the same way, but open as channels, as pathways, as points of connection between their pain and the pain of others. The wound that will not close becomes the very thing that allows grace to flow through you. It becomes the crack where the light gets in, the broken place where healing begins for everyone you touch. But you must first cease fighting it. Cease hating yourself for being wounded. Cease believing that your pain disqualifies you from purpose. Cease treating your sensitivity as weakness and your struggles as failure, because the wound is not evidence that God has abandoned you. It is evidence that He has marked you for something you cannot yet see. Your addiction has been protecting you from the full weight of this wound. It has been a buffer, a shield, a way to survive pain that felt unendurable. And perhaps it was necessary for a time. Perhaps you needed that protection until you were strong enough to face what lies beneath. But eventually, the protection becomes the prison. The very thing that helped you survive becomes the thing that prevents you from living when you are ready. When the pain of staying the same finally exceeds the fear of change, you will begin to approach your wound differently, not with hatred or shame, but with curiosity, not demanding that it disappear, but asking what it has to teach you. And in that moment of turning toward instead of away, everything shifts. The wound does not close, but it transforms. It becomes less about your personal suffering and more about your shared humanity. It becomes less about what was done to you and more about what you can offer others. It becomes the source of your greatest gift, the ability to sit with someone in their darkest moment and say without words, "I know, I have been there. You are not alone." This is why God speaks to His chosen ones through addiction and through wounds that refuse to heal. Because only those who have descended into the deepest darkness can guide others out of it. Only those who have carried unbearable pain can help others bear theirs. And only those who have learned to live with a sacred wound can teach others that brokenness is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new one. So now you stand at the edge of understanding, looking back at everything the fire has revealed. The thirst that could not be quenched was teaching you that nothing in this world will ever be enough. The falling that felt like failure was actually the descent you needed to meet your truest self. The shadow that terrified you was simply waiting to be recognized, to be integrated, to become your guide instead of your tormentor. The craving that consumed you was always pointing towards something deeper, something sacred that you were seeking in all the wrong places. And the wound that refused to heal became the very crack through which your light now shines. This is what I understood and what few others have dared to say. Your addiction was never the enemy. It was the messenger. God does not speak to everyone through such devastating means because not everyone needs to be broken open in this particular way. But you did. And now you know why. You were chosen not for comfort but for transformation, not for ease but for depth, not to live a simple life but to walk a path that would forge you into something unbreakable. Every moment of suffering, every relapse, every shame-filled mourning, every desperate prayer, it was all preparation. You were being trained in the darkness so you could carry light into places where others cannot go. The conversation is not over. God is still speaking through your struggles, through your questions, through your ongoing journey. But now you can finally hear Him, not in the noise of your addiction, but in the silence after you cease running. Not in the high, but in the hunger that the high could never satisfy. Not in the escape, but in the return to yourself again and again. No matter how many times you fall, you are awake now, and that changes everything. You continue your